Chapter 17, The Bridge of Khazad-dûm. The Fellowship of the Ring stood silently beside Balin's tomb. Frodo thought of Bilbo and his long friendship with the dwarf, and of Balin's visit to the Shire long ago. In this dusty room within the mountains, it seemed as if 1,000 years had come back from the other world. At last, they moved and looked around, beginning to search for anything that might give them information about Balin's fate or what had happened to his people. There was a smaller door at the far side of the room, lying under a shaft of light. On both sides of the doors they could see many boxes lying about, and among them were many broken swords along with many axe heads, shattered shields, and helmets. Some of the swords had hooks at their tips. They were the scimitars of the orcs with black blades. There were many recesses cut into the stone walls, and among them was a large wooden iron-bound chest. Everything had been broken and looted. But beside the shattered lids lay a book. It had been pierced diagonally and partly burned, and it was blackened and spotted with stains like dried blood, leaving only a very small portion legible. Gandalf carefully lifted it, but the pages rustled and tore as he set it on a slab of stone. He absorbed himself in reading for a while without speaking. Frodo and Gimli stood beside him and could see, as he carefully turned the pages, that they were written by many different hands, in the ancient tongues of both Moria and Dale, and occasionally with lines in the Elvish script. At last, Gandalf raised his head. "This seems to be a record of the possessions of Balin's people," he said. "I guess it began on the night they arrived at Dimril Dale 30 years ago. The pages appear to be numbered according to the years after their arrival. The first page is numbered 1, 3, so at least 2 opening pages are missing. Listen, we have driven back the orcs from the Great Gate and defended, I think. The next part is blurred and burned. Perhaps it was the chamber. We have slain many in the light, I think so. The sun in the dale. Flúi was killed by an arrow. He slew a great one. Then the next part is blurred. Then Flúi lies beneath the grass near Miramir. I cannot read 1 or 2 lines following. Then it says we have used Chamber 21 at the far north as dwelling. That part I cannot read. It speaks of a shaft. Then Balin established his seat in the Chamber of Records." "The Chamber of Records," said Gimli. "I guess it is the room we are standing in now." "Yes." "I cannot read a long passage following," Gandalf said, "except for the words gold and Durin's axe and some kind of helm." "Then Balin is now the Lord of Moria. It seems that one chapter ends here. After some asterisks, another hand begins to write, and I read that we have found true silver, and then fine forge work and something else, I know, mithril. And the last 2 lines, Uin found the armories above on the 3rd deep level, some words heading west, a blurred mark, toward the Hollin Gate." Gandalf paused and set a few pages aside. "There are many pages of this kind, apparently written hurriedly and badly damaged," he said. "But I cannot make much of it in this light. By now, quite a number of pages must be lost, for they began numbering them from year 5, the 5th year of the colonization, I guess. Let's see. No, they are too torn and blurred. I cannot read them. Better to do this in sunlight. Wait, here is something. It is written by a strong, large hand in Elvish script." "That must be Ori's hand," said Gimli, looking up at the wizard. "He could write neatly and swiftly, and often used Elvish letters." "I fear he was writing out misfortune with a golden hand," Gandalf said. "The first word is plainly grief, but the rest of the line is lost, except it ends in Estra. Yes, it must be Yestran, yesterday. Then the 10th day of the 11th month Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimril Dale. He had gone alone to seek Miramir. An orc shot him from behind with a stone. We slew the orc, erected more tents. From the east, over the silver mine. The rest of the page is too blurred for me to read clearly, but I think I read we blocked the gate, and then perhaps held out long if, and then perhaps terrible and grievous." "Poor Balin. He seems to have held his lordship less than 5 years. I do not know what happened after, but there is no time to solve the riddles on the last pages. Here is the penultimate page." He paused and sighed. "Reading this is sorrowful," he said. "I fear its ending is dreadful. Listen, we could not escape. They have taken the bridge and the 2nd chamber. Farbiar and Luno and NBLI fell there. And then 4 lines are so defaced I can only read from 5 days ago. The last line is to run across the water on the wall at the west gate. The water guard caught Uin. We could not escape. The end is coming, and then drums, drums, sounding from below.
I do not know what this means.
The last thing written here is scrawled in elvish letters. They are coming.
Nothing more. Gandalf paused and stood silent, deep in thought. A sudden sense of terror and horror filled the room over the fellowship.
We cannot escape, murmured Gimli. Luckily, the water in the pool has fallen considerably, and the guard is sleeping down in the southern depths. Gandalf raised his head and looked around. It seems they fought to the last at both doors, he said, but there is not much time left.
That is the end of the effort to reclaim Moria.
It was brave but foolish.
Not yet the hour.
Now I fear we must bid farewell to Balin, son of Fundin. He must lie here in his forefather's chamber. We will take his book, the Book of Mazarbul, and look more closely. You should keep it, Gimli, and bring it back to Dibin if you have the chance. He will care greatly for this book, though it will bring him much sorrow.
Now let us go. Morning has passed. Which way shall we go? Asked Boromir. Back to the antechamber, Gandalf replied.
But our visit to this chamber is not entirely in vain. Now I know where we are. Certainly, as Gimli said, we are in the chamber of Mazarbul, and this must be the 21st chamber at the northern end. Therefore we should exit through the eastern arch of the room, then turn right southwards and descend. Chamber 21 must be on the 7th level above the 6th level gate. Come on! Back to the antechamber. Gandalf spoke with difficulty, for a great boom rolled up, seeming from far below, making the rock beneath their feet shake. They hurried toward the door. The sounds of doom. Doom rolled up, but no giant hands were turning Moria's halls into a vast drum. Then came a mighty, echoing blast. A tremendous horn sounded through the room, followed by a responding horn and rude shouts from afar. Hasty footsteps were heard. "They're coming!"
cried Legolas. "We cannot escape," said Gimli. "Trapped!"
shouted Gandalf.
"Why did I stop?"
"Now we are here, stuck, but they were before. But I am not so. We shall see." The drums of doom. Doom rolled and the walls shook. "Shut the door and bar it," cried Aragorn. "And watch your belongings while we can. We may have a chance to decide our path." "No," said Gandalf.
"We cannot close it. Let the eastern door stay ajar."
"We will go that way if we have a chance." A shrill horn blared, and mind-numbing cries echoed. Heavy footsteps rushed down the corridor. Clanging sounds echoed as the fellowship drew swords. Glamdring shone with a faint light, and the sting's blade glimmered. Boromir braced himself against the western gate. "Wait."
"Don't close it yet,"
Gandalf said. He rushed to Boromir and pulled him upright. "Who comes here to disturb the slumber of Balin, Lord of Moria?" he shouted, his voice echoing. A series of hoarse laughs answered, like stones sliding into a pool. They echoed amid screams rising from below, giving orders. The drums of doom, boom, doom resounded from the depths. With a very swift motion, Gandalf stepped forward into the narrow passage opening from the door and thrust his staff ahead. A flash of lightning lit up the room and the passage outside. The wizard looked out for a moment. The orcs streaked down the hall as he recoiled. "Orcs, many of them," he said. "Some are large and foul, the black Uruks of Mordor. They are falling back for a moment, but there is another one out there."
"A terrible cave demon, I think, or perhaps more than one."
"No hope of escape this way." "And no hope at all if they come from the other doors as well," said Boromir. "There is no sound from outside," said Aragorn, still standing by the eastern door, listening. "The passage here leads straight down the stairs. It clearly does not go to the antechamber. But blindly rushing down this way with pursuers behind is foolish. We cannot bar the door. The key is lost and the lock is broken, opening inward.
"We must do something to delay them."
"We must make them fear the chamber of Mazarbul," he said, lightly stroking the blade of his sword, Andúril. Heavy footsteps sounded in the corridor. Boromir sprang back to the door and lifted it, then wedged it with broken swords and pieces of wood. The fellowship fell back to the far side of the room, yet they still had no chance to escape. A strong push made the door shake. It began to slowly creak open, swinging against the wedges. A massive arm and shoulder with dark blue-scaled skin thrust through the widening gap. Then a flat, gigantic foot without toes stomped through. A deadly silence fell outside. Boromir rushed and struck the arm with all his strength, but his sword glanced aside and fell off his trembling target. The blade was nicked. Suddenly, for his own purpose, Frodo felt a surge of fury in his heart.
"The Shire?"
he cried, and ran to Boromir, stooping to drive Sting hard into the foul foot.
A scream rang out, and the foot jerked back, almost wrenching Sting from Frodo's hand.
Dark drops fell from the blade, and smoke rose from the floor. Boromir hurled himself toward the door and slammed it shut. "One sword for the Shire," shouted Aragorn. "This hobbit's strike goes deep."
"A fine sword, Frodo, son of Drogo."
A crack appeared in the door, then successive splits formed. The hammering of massive blows rang out. The door groaned and began to fall aside, and suddenly it burst open. The orc screeched but struck the north wall and tumbled to the floor harmlessly. Then a horn blared, and heavy footsteps thundered as orcs poured into the room. The fellowship could not count how many there were. The battle was chaotic, but the orcs' morale broke under the fierce resistance.
Legolas shot 2 through the throat. Gimli chopped down one pair of legs after another, leaping onto Balin's tomb.
Boromir and Aragorn slew many others. When 13 had fallen, the rest screamed and fled, leaving the defenders unharmed, except Sam, who had a scratch on his scalp. He had ducked quickly and survived, and struck down his orc with a strong thrust of his barrow blade. A spark flared in his brown eyes, making Ted Sandyman step back if he had seen it. "It's time," Gandalf shouted.
"Go before the giant returns!"
But even as they retreated before Pippin and Merry could reach the stairs leading out, the orc chieftain, nearly human height, clad in black armor from head to foot, leapt into the room, followed by his horde at the doorway. His broad face was black, his eyes like coals, and his tongue red. He carried a huge mace. He thrust it against Boromir's sword and knocked him backward, slamming him to the floor. Slithering under Aragorn's strike with the speed of a striking snake,
he lunged at the fellowship, thrusting his mace toward Frodo. The blow hit Frodo's shoulder, hurling him against the wall, pinning him there.
Sam shouted, chopping at the mace shaft, and it broke. Yet even as the orc discarded the shaft and drew his sword, Andúril struck down his helm. A flash like fire burst forth, and the helm shattered. The orc fell, his head cleft in two.
His minions shrieked as Boromir and Aragorn rushed at them. The drums of doom. Doom resounded again from the deep.
A dreadful sound echoed once more. "Now!" Gandalf shouted.
"This is the last chance. Run!" Aragorn lifted Frodo from the wall and dashed toward the stairs, pushing Merry and Pippin ahead.
The others followed, but Gimli needed Legolas to pull him along, despite the danger, lingering around Balin's tomb, head bowed. Boromir yanked the gate firmly. Its hinges screamed and groaned. Both surfaces had iron rings, but it could not be moved quickly. "I'm fine," gasped Frodo. "Set me down!"
Aragorn nearly dropped him in surprise. "I thought you were dead," he cried. "Not yet,"
Gandalf said. "But there's no time for astonishment.
"Go all of you down the stairs."
Wait a few minutes for me at the bottom, but if I do not descend soon, go ahead."
"Move quickly, choose the paths to the right and descend. We cannot leave you alone to guard the door,"
said Aragorn. "Do as I say," Gandalf said angrily.
"Swords are useless here. Go."
No light shone down the passage, and it was entirely dark. They groped their way down the long steps, glancing back, but they could see nothing except the faint light from the wizard's staff above. He seemed still to be standing guard by the closed door. Frodo breathed heavily and fell against Sam, who wrapped his arms around him. They looked back into the shadow on the stairs. Frodo thought he could hear Gandalf's voice above, whispers drifting from the sloping roof with echoing sighs. He could not understand what they said. The walls seemed to quake. From time to time the drums sounded again. Doom, doom. Suddenly, the top of the staircase flared with a white light. Then dust fell with a heavy thud. The drums rolled wildly. Doom boom, and then they stopped. Gandalf staggered down the steps and fell to the ground among the fellowship. Well,
It's done,
the wizard said, his legs trembling. I have done all that I could, but I met my match and I was nearly destroyed. But don't stand here. Go on. You must go without light for a while. I am shaking all over. Go on, go on. Where are you, Gimli?
Lead the way. All of you, keep close behind.
They hobbled after him, wondering what had happened. The drum beats, doom, doom, echoed again. Now the sound was muffled and far away, yet still pursued them. No other noise followed, not even the sound of footsteps or movement. Gandalf did not turn either left or right, for the path seemed to lead where he wished. From time to time it descended by a short flight of stairs, 50 steps or more, to a lower level. That was when they were in the most danger, for they could not see the drop until they stepped upon it, and their feet nearly slipped into empty air. Gandalf groped his way forward with his staff like a blind man. At last, after nearly an hour, or perhaps more, they had gone about a mile and had descended many steps. Still there was no sound of pursuit. They almost began to hope they had escaped. At the end of the 7th level, Gandalf halted. "It's getting hot," he panted. "We are now at least down to the level of the gate. I think we should find a passage leading left toward the east."
I hope it isn't far. I am very weary. I must sit and think for a while, even if all the orcs of Moria were marching behind me. Gimli took his arm and helped him sit on a stone step.
"What happened at the door?" he asked. "Did you meet the drummer?"
I do not know, Gandalf answered.
"But I suddenly came face to face with something I have never encountered before."
I could think of nothing to do except try to shut the door with a sealing spell.
"I know many spells of that sort, but to say the right words at the right moment requires time."
And even so, the door might be broken by force. As I stood there, I could hear the orcs shouting on the other side. I thought they would burst in at any second. I could not catch what they said.
It seemed they were talking in their foul tongue. All I could hear clearly was G-Chulvish. I do not know how to pronounce it properly. It means fire. Then something came into the room. I felt it rush through the door, and even the orcs fell silent in terror. It seized the iron ring, and then it perceived me and my spell. That was something I had not foreseen, for I have never before been challenged like that. Its counterspell was terrible.
It almost broke me.
For a moment the door slipped from my control and began to open. I had to utter the commanding word. It was a dreadful struggle. The door burst into fragments. Something dark as a cloud filled all the space inside, and I was hurled backward down the stairs. The walls shook, and so did the ceiling, I think. I fear that Balin is buried deep, and maybe something else is buried there with him.
I cannot say what it is.
But at least the way behind us is now completely blocked.
I have never felt so spent, but it is over. And now how are you, Frodo?
There was no time to ask before, but I have never been so glad in my life as when I heard you speak again. I feared Aragorn was carrying a brave hobbit who was already dead. What's wrong with me? Frodo said.
I'm alive, and that's all that matters.
I'm bruised and battered, but not badly hurt. Yes, said Aragorn. I can only say this hobbit is made of sterner stuff than any I've ever met. Had I known that, I would have spoken more softly at the inn in Bree. That thrust could have skewered a wild bull. Yes, but it didn't skewer me, I'm happy to say, said Frodo, though I feel as if I've been caught between a hammer and an anvil. He said no more. Breathing painfully. You are like Bilbo, said Gandalf. There's more to you than meets the eye, as I said of him long ago. Frodo wondered if that meant something more than it seemed. Now they moved on again. Soon Gimli spoke, his keen eyes peering through the dark. "I think," he said, "there's a light ahead."
"But it's not daylight." "It's red."
"What is it?"
"Gush!"
said Gandalf. "I don't know what it means. Are the lower levels burning?" "We can only keep going." The light began to glow visibly, and all could see it. It flickered and played upon the walls of the passage ahead. They could not yet see their path. Before them it sloped sharply down, and beyond was a low archway from which the light streamed. The air grew very hot. When they reached the arch, Gandalf went forward and motioned for them to wait. Standing in the glow, his face was lit blood red. He stepped quickly back. "There is something strange and evil in there," he said.
"It seems prepared to receive us."
"But now I know where we are. We have come to the first deep, the middle level below the gate. That is the second hall of Old Moria,
"And the gate is near behind the eastern corner to the left, not more than 1/4 of a mile."
Across the bridge, up the broad stairs, along the great passage through the first hall, and out. But come and be watchful." They looked out. Before them lay another vast cavernous hall, loftier and wider than any they had yet seen. They stood near its eastern end. Its western reaches vanished into shadow. In the centre rose 2 mighty pillars, hewn like the trunks of great trees, their branches supporting the arched roof, carved and ornamented with stone tracery. The pillars were smooth and black, but the red glow gleamed faintly upon their sides. Across the floor, near the bases of the pillars, a huge fissure opened.
A fierce red light issued from it, and from time to time flames leapt up and licked the edges, curling around the feet of the pillars.
Black smoke coiled in the hot air. "If we had taken the main road down from the upper halls, we'd be trapped here," said Gandalf. "Let us hope that the fire lies between us and our pursuers. Come."
There's no time to lose. Even as he spoke, the drumbeats rolled again. Doom, doom, doom.
From the dark behind them, far to the west, came cries and the blowing of horns. "Doom, doom!" The pillars seemed to tremble and the flames flickered. "Now for the last race,"
Gandalf cried.
"If the sun is shining outside, we may yet escape."
"Follow me."
He turned left and ran swiftly across the level floor of the hall. The distance was greater than it looked.
As they ran, they heard the clatter and echo of many hurrying feet behind.
A shrill scream rang out. They had been seen.
Steel clashed.
An arrow whistled over Frodo's head. Boromir laughed. "They did not expect this," he said. "The fire has cut them off. We are on the wrong side for them." Suddenly Frodo saw a deep rift before him. At the far end of the hall, the floor vanished into a gulf of unknown depth. The only way across to the outer door was a narrow stone bridge, unrailed and unpaved, spanning the chasm with a 50-foot leap. It was one of the ancient defences of the dwarves against any enemy that might seize the first hall and the passage to the gate. They could only cross it in single file. Gandalf halted at the brink, and the others crowded up behind him. "Lead the way, Gimli," he said.
Pippin and Merry follow.
"Go straight ahead and climb the stairs behind the gate." Enemies fell all around them.
An arrow struck Frodo and rebounded.
Another tore Gandalf's hood and became lodged there like a black feather. Frodo looked back. He saw dark shapes massed behind the fire. It appeared there were hundreds of orcs. They brandished maces, scimitars, and red-hot stones in the firelight. The drums sounded doom, doom, rising louder and louder. Doom, doom. Legolas turned, knocked an arrow, though the bow was too long for him. Then his arm went limp, and the arrow dropped.
He cried out in terror.
2 monstrous fiends appeared, bearing great slabs of rock, which they flung down to form a path across the fire. But it was not those giants that filled the elf's heart with dread. The ranks of orcs parted, as though even they feared. Something was rising behind them. It was hard to see, like a great dark shadow in a shadowy form, perhaps even humanoid, but so much larger. Within it grew power and terror pressing forward. It strode forward beside the flames, and the light was suddenly swallowed as if by a cloud. It leapt through the fire. The fire flared to greet it, smoke swirling around it. Its hair streamed behind it, glowing and aflame. In its right hand it held a sword that seemed to blaze. In its left a whip of many strands of leather. "Ah!"
cried Legolas.
"A Balrog."
"A Balrog is come."
Gimli stared wide-eyed. "Durin's bane," he shouted, casting down his axe and shielding his face. "A Balrog," Gandalf muttered. "Now I understand." He tottered and leaned heavily on his staff. "A Khazad-dûm indeed, and I am already weary." The dark shadow drew nearer across the bridge. The orcs shrieked and surged down the stone steps. Boromir lifted his horn and blew a challenge. The blast echoed clear, like many voices roaring in caverns. For a moment the orcs faltered, and the dread shadow paused. Then the echoes died away, as though a flame had been snuffed by a dark wind, and the enemy advanced once more. "Across! Quick!" Gandalf shouted, summoning strength.
"Run! This foe is beyond any of you. I must hold the narrow pass. Go!"
Aragorn and Boromir, however, did not obey, but stood firm side by side just behind Gandalf at the far end of the bridge. The others hesitated at the threshold, unable to abandon their leader facing such terror alone. The Balrog came to the bridge. Gandalf stood mid-span, lifting his staff with his left hand, and in his right the blade Glamdring shone, fierce and white. The foe halted, facing him, and its dark form unfurled two great wings. It lifted its whip, snarling strands crackling. Flames issued from its nostrils. Yet Gandalf stood unwavering. "You cannot pass," he proclaimed. The orcs halted, and a deadly silence fell. "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass." "The dark fire will not avail you, Flame of Udun. Go back." "You cannot pass." The Balrog made no answer. The fire about it flickered, and darkness surged. It advanced slowly toward the bridge. Then suddenly it reared up, its wings stretching from wall to wall. Gandalf, faint in gloom, looked small and alone, like a withered tree before a storm. Then a red sword blade lanced forth from darkness. Glamdring responded in kind with a flash of white. The clash rang with thunder, white fire blazing. The Balrog was forced back. Its blade shattered into fragments. Gandalf, unsteady, took a step back, then straightened his stance. "You cannot pass," he cried again. The Balrog leapt, attacking the bridge.
Its whip lashed and howled. "He cannot stand alone," Aragorn yelled, rushing onto the bridge. "Elendil!" he cried. "I come to you, Gandalf." "Gondor!"
Boromir cried, following. At that moment Gandalf raised his staff and unleashed a great cry, slamming it down on the bridge before him. The staff broke with a crack and fell. A blinding white light flared. The bridge cracked beneath the Balrog's feet. The stone under it crumbled and tumbled into the abyss, while the remainder trembled like a tongue of rock, pulling away from the void. With a dreadful roar, the Balrog plunged forward, its shadow plunging into the abyss. Even as it fell, it lashed with its whip, catching Gandalf's knees, dragging him toward the edge. He staggered, clung desperately to stone, and was drawn in. "Fly, you fools!" he cried, and vanished. The light faded, and the darkness swallowed all. The Fellowship stood rooted in horror, staring into the chasm. Even as Aragorn and Boromir rushed forward, the remainder of the bridge cracked and collapsed.
Aragorn's shout broke their trance. "Come on! I will lead you now," he called.
"We must obey the last command."
"Follow me."
They raced up the great stair behind the gate. Aragorn led. Boromir brought up the rear. At the top was a broad causeway. They ran along it. Frodo heard Sam sobbing beside him and saw that he too was crying as they fled. The drums still sounded behind them. Doom! 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 Slower, sadder! Doom! They kept running. Light was rising ahead. Broad shafts of sunbeams pierced through the roof. They emerged into a hall blazing with daylight through eastern windows. They charged across it, through shattered great doors, and suddenly the great gate yawned before them. An arch, radiant with light, an army of orcs, sheltered in darkness behind the columns of the great gate, but the gates had fallen and lay in ruin. Aragorn felled the captain who barred their way, and the rest fled in fear of him. The fellowship streaked past them, seeing no more. As they passed through the gate, they ran down broad, worn steps, the threshold of Moria. At last they felt hope return as they stood beneath open sky, the cold wind upon their faces. They did not pause until they were far from the walls. Before them lay the Dimril Dale, beneath the shadow of the misty mountains, though to the east a shaft of golden sunlight lay across the vale. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun shone. White clouds floated. They turned and looked back. The arch of the great gate yawned dark beneath the mountain. A thin black column of smoke trailed upward, and behind all came a slow, mournful drumbeat. Doom. They wept long, some standing, some falling to earth.
Doom, doom.
The drumbeat faded. Chapter 18. Lothlorien, alas!
I fear that we cannot remain here any longer, said Aragorn.
He looked back toward the mountains and raised his sword high.
Farewell, Gandalf, he cried. Did I not say to you, if you pass through the gates of Moria, take care? Alas, I spoke true. What hope have we left without you?
He turned to the fellowship. We must go on without hope, he said.
At least we can still avenge him.
Let us gather our strength and weep no more. Come, a long road lies ahead, and much remains to be done. They rose and looked behind them. The valley to the north climbed toward a dark, narrow gorge lying between two great rocky slopes. Above it gleamed the 3 white peaks, Celebdil, Fanwidhol, and Caradhras, the mountains of Moria. At the head of the gorge ran a swift stream, white as lace, tumbling over countless short falls and foaming into mist around the mountain's foot. There lies the Dimril Stair, said Aragorn, pointing toward the shining towers. Below it runs the road that winds up beside the stream, if fortune favours us. To the east, the mountain walls suddenly ceased, and beyond them stretched broad, dim lands. To the south, the misty mountains still rolled away until sight could reach no further. Less than a mile below, for they stood high on the western slope of the vale, lay a lake, long and oval, shaped like the blade of a great spearhead, thrust deep into the northern gorge. But its southern end sank in shadow beneath the bright sky. Its waters were dark, a deep blue like twilight seen through a lamp-lit room. The surface lay smooth and unbroken. Beside it spread a soft lawn, forming a perfect ring of green around the lake. Miramir lies there, in the deep Kheled-Zaram, said Gimli sorrowfully. I remember his words. It would be pleasant to look upon, but we cannot linger here. Now I shall go far before I am glad again. He must lie here, and I must go on. The fellowship now descended the path leading from the gate. It was steep and winding, turning among heather and gorse that sprang between the rocks. Yet it was clear that once long ago a great paved road had climbed up from the lower lands to the dwarf kingdom. Ruins of stonework lay scattered along the way, green mounds overgrown with slender birches or whispering firs. A branch path turned eastward, leading them across the meadows of Miramir, and near the open road stood a broken pillar. That is Durin's stone, cried Gimli. I cannot pass without turning aside to look upon the wonder of this valley.
Then be swift,
said Aragorn, glancing back toward the gate. The sun is setting fast. The orcs may not come out till after nightfall, but we must be far away before dark. The moon is waning, and this night will be very black. Come with me, Frodo, cried the dwarf, leaping from the road. I cannot let you go without seeing Kheled-Zaram. He ran down the green slope, Frodo following slowly, heavy-hearted rather than weary or in pain. Sam trudged after them. Gimli halted beside the stone and looked up. It was cracked and worn by time, and the faint runes upon it were now unreadable. "This column marks the place where Durin first looked into Mirrormere," said the dwarf. "Let us look upon it ourselves before we go." They stooped over the dark water. At first they saw nothing. Then slowly they perceived the shape of a crown of mountains mirrored deep in the blue abyss, and amid them shone the white flames of their snowy peaks. Above them lay a pale sky. The stars were reflected like jewels drowned in the depths, though the sun still shone above. No shadow of those bending over could be seen. "O fair and marvellous Kheled-Zaram," said Gimli, "the crown of Durin shall lie here till he wakes again."
Farewell.
He bowed and turned away, hurrying back up the green slope toward the road. "What did you see?" Pippin asked Sam, but Sam, deep in thought, made no answer. The road now bent southward and descended quickly, leaving the edge of the valley. They followed a path below the lake that ran beside a clear waterfall, a shining stream leaping down over a rocky ledge and tumbling in glittering foam. "This is the stream that rises from the Silver Lode," said Gimli. "Do not drink it.
It is cold as death."
"Soon it will grow into a strong river, gathering waters from many mountain springs," said Aragorn. "Our road will follow it for many miles, for I shall lead you by the path Gandalf had chosen."
"And we shall first hope to reach the forest where the Silver Lode joins the great river, flowing eastward from here." They looked where he pointed,
and before them they saw the stream rushing down into the basin of the valley, winding away across the lower lands until it was lost in golden mist. "There lies the forest of Lothlorien," said Legolas. "That is the fairest dwelling of my people. There the trees are not like those elsewhere. In autumn their leaves turn not brown, but golden, and they fall not until the spring returns, when fresh green unfolds. Then the boughs are laden with golden blossom. The ground beneath is golden, the roof above is golden, and the pillars are of silver grey, smooth and shapely. Still some songs of our folk in Mirkwood sing of it."
"My heart would be glad indeed to dwell beneath that canopy in the springtime."
"My heart too," said Aragorn, "even were it winter. But it is many miles away yet."
"Let us hasten."
Frodo and Sam struggled to keep up, but Aragorn led with tireless strides, and soon they lagged behind. They had eaten nothing since early morning. Sam's wound burned like fire, and his face grew pale. The chill seemed to follow them out of the warm darkness of Moria. He shivered. Frodo felt pain in every step and breathed heavily. At last, Legolas looked back and saw how far they had fallen behind. He spoke to Aragorn, and the others halted while Aragorn ran back, calling Boromir with him. "I am sorry, Frodo," he cried with concern. "So much has befallen today that we were driven to haste, and I forgot that you and Sam are wounded."
"You should have spoken."
"We have done nothing to ease your burden, though we ought, even if all the orcs of Moria were behind us. Come, it is not far now to a place where we may rest a little."
"Come, Boromir."
"We will carry them." Soon they came to another stream flowing down from the west, joining the foaming waters of the Silver Lode. Together they plunged over a fall of green stone and roared into a small glen. There stood a single fir tree, short and bent, its slope thick with ferns and twisted shrubs. At the bottom spread a rough patch of ground through which a murmuring brook ran over bright pebbles. There they rested. It was now about 3 hours after noon, and they had gone only a few miles from the gate. The sun was sinking in the west. While Gimli and the 2 younger hobbits built a fire from brushwood and fir branches and went to fetch water, Aragorn tended to Sam and Frodo. Sam's wound was not deep, but it looked troubling, and Aragorn's face grew grim as he examined it.
After a while he looked up in relief. "Lucky for you, Sam," he said.
Many have suffered worse wounds than this for the honor of slaying their first orc. The cut is not poisoned, as the blades of orcs often are. It will heal quickly once I've treated it. Wash it when Gimli has boiled the water." He opened his small pouch and took out a handful of dried leaves. "They're dry now, and some of their virtue is gone," he said. "But here I still have some athalas that I gathered near Weathertop. Crush them into the water, then bathe the wound, and I'll bind it up. Now, Frodo, it's your turn."
"I'm all right, really," said Frodo, drawing back and holding his clothes close.
"All I need is a bit of food and some sleep." "No," said Aragorn. "We must see what the hammer and the anvil have done to you."
"I still marvel that you're alive." He gently undid Frodo's cloak and saw the mail shirt beneath it.
Then he started in amazement and suddenly laughed aloud. The silver coat sparkled before him like rippling light upon the sea. Carefully he lifted it up, and the gems shimmered like stars, while the rings of metal chimed softly like rain falling upon a quiet lake. "Look, my friends," he cried, "here's a fine hobbit skin for an elf prince to wear. If hunters knew the Shire folk carried things like this, they'd be off to the Shire at once. And all the arrows of all the hunters in the world would be of no use," said Gimli, staring at the mail in wonder.
"That is a coat of mithril.
"I have never seen or heard tell of one so fair. Did Gandalf speak of this? Then he undervalued it. But it's found a worthy wearer."
"I always wondered what mischief you and old Bilbo were up to, shut away in that little room of his," said Merry. "Bless that old hobbit. I love him better than ever. I hope we'll live to tell him so."
There was a dark bruise on Frodo's right shoulder and chest. Beneath the mail he wore a soft leather shirt, and the rings had been driven into his flesh at one point. His left side, too, was bruised and scraped where he had been thrown hard against the wall. While the others prepared food, Aragorn washed the wounds with hot water steeped in athalas. A fragrance filled the valley, and all who stood within the rising steam felt refreshed and strengthened. Frodo soon felt the pain ease and his chest grow calm again, though he remained sore and stiff for many days after.
Aragorn bound soft pads of cloth to his side. "This mail is astonishingly light," said Aragorn.
"Wear it again if you can bear it. My heart is glad that you have such armor. Do not take it off even in sleep, unless fortune brings you to a place of safety for a time, and that is not likely while your quest remains unfinished." When they had eaten, the fellowship prepared to set out once more. They stamped out the fire and erased all signs of their rest. Then they climbed from the hollow and returned to the old road. When the sun sank behind the high western cliffs, they had not gone far, and vast shadows were spreading over the mountainside. Twilight deepened upon their steps, and mists rose in the valley. Far to the east, a pale gleam of sunset shone on the dim lands of forest and plain. Sam and Frodo now felt greatly recovered and could walk at a steady pace, and Aragorn led them for nearly 3 more hours, resting only once, briefly. It grew very dark. Night had fallen, bright with stars, and only late did a thin new moon appear. Gimli and Frodo came last, walking softly and speaking not a word, listening for any sound behind them. At last Gimli broke the silence. "There is no sound but the wind," he said. "No orcs near, or my ears are made of wood. Perhaps they were content to drive us out of Moria, and that was their intent. Maybe they want nothing to do with us, or with the ring. Yet orcs will often chase an enemy for many leagues across the plain to avenge a fallen captain." Frodo did not answer. He glanced at Sting, but its blade remained dull. Yet he had heard something, or thought he had. From the moment darkness fell and the road behind grew black, he fancied he heard quick footsteps following. And now he heard them again. He turned swiftly. For an instant he thought he saw 2 tiny points of light behind them, but they vanished as they turned aside. "What is it?" said the dwarf. "I don't know," Frodo replied.
I thought I heard footsteps, and I thought I saw eyes.
I've seen them before, ever since we entered Moria. Gimli stopped and bent low to the ground. I hear nothing but the night breeze among grass and stone, he said.
Come, let's hurry!
The others are nearly out of sight. The night wind blew cold across the valley as they descended. Before them lay a shadowy expanse of faint grey, and they heard a ceaseless rustle of leaves in the poplars stirred by the wind. "Lothlorien!" cried Legolas.
Lothlorien?
"We have come beneath the golden wood."
Alas that it is winter now.
The trees stood tall before them in the night, arching above the path and the stream that ran suddenly beneath their spreading boughs. In the starlight their trunks were grey, and their leaves trembled, glinting faintly with gold. "Lothlorien!" said Aragorn. "I am glad to hear the wind in its trees again. We are now no more than 5 miles from the gate of the forest. We can go no farther tonight. Let us hope the power of the elves will guard our sleep from the evil that follows behind. If the elves still truly dwell here in this darkening world," said Gimli. "It's long since any of our folk returned from this land," said Legolas. "But we have heard that Lorien is not deserted, for a secret power is said to ward off all evil from it. Yet, though we rarely see them, the elves may still dwell deep within the woods, far from the northern borders." "They do," said Aragorn softly, and sighed, as if an old memory stirred within him. "Tonight we must guard ourselves. We'll go on a little farther, until the trees are above us, then leave the road and find a resting place." He moved forward, but Boromir lingered, unwilling to follow. "Is there no other way?" he said. "Would you choose another road more pleasant?" said Aragorn. "A road through open fields, though it led through a hedge of swords," said Boromir. "Fate has led this fellowship upon strange paths, where peril outweighs all hope. Against our will we passed through Moria and suffered loss. And now you say we must cross the Golden Wood. Yet in Gondor we have heard tales of that perilous land, where few enter and fewer return, and those who do come out bear strange marks." "If you said changed instead of scarred, you would speak truly," said Aragorn. "But Laura has faded even in Gondor, Boromir, if the wise men of that city speak ill of Lothlorien. Believe what you will, but there is no other path, unless you wish to go back to Moria, or cross the trackless mountains, or swim the great river on your own." "Then lead on," said Boromir. "Yet it is perilous indeed." "Perilous, yes," said Aragorn, "clear and perilous. But only evil need fear it, or those who carry evil with them."
Follow me.
They had gone scarcely a mile into the forest when they came upon another stream, rushing down from a steep slope of the western hills. They heard it splashing far off in a hidden fall. Its dark waters ran across the path before them and joined the Silverlode in a dim pool among the roots of the trees. "That is Nimrodel," said Legolas. "Long ago the elves of the Silver Wood made many songs about this stream, and we still sing of it in the north, remembering the rainbow on its falls and its golden course to the sea. But now all is dim, and the bridge of Nimrodel is broken. I will bathe my feet in it, for they say its waters wash away weariness." He stepped down the deep bank and into the stream. "Follow me," he called. "It's not too deep.
Let us cross.
We can rest upon the far bank. The sound of the water will lull us to sleep and drive away our cares." One by one they followed him. Frodo lingered a moment on the near side and let the water flow about his tired feet. It was chill but clean, and as he stood there until it rose to his knees, he felt that all the weariness of the long road was washed away. When all had crossed, they sat and ate a little. Then Legolas told them the tale of Lothlorien, as the elves of Mirkwood still sang of it, the story of the sunlight and moonlight upon the lawns of the great river before the world grew grey. At last all fell silent, and they heard the music of the falling stream soft in the night. Frodo fancied he could hear a voice mingled with the sound of the water, singing faintly and far away. "Do you hear the voice of Nimrodel?" said Legolas. "I will sing to you a song of the maiden Nimrodel, who bore the same name as the stream that flows beside us.
It is a fair song in the elven tongue of our woodland folk.
Yet I will sing it in the common speech, as some in Rivendell now do." In a soft voice, barely audible amid the whispering of the forest leaves above them, he began to sing. There once was an elven maid in days of old, when moon and stars shone bright and bold. Her robe was white, its hemline gleamed, her shoes of silver softly beamed. A star upon her brow did lie, her hair shone fair as sunlight's sky, like golden rays on branches spun, in lovely Lorien beneath the sun. Her hair was long, her hands pure white, her beauty free, a wondrous sight. In gentle wind she glided light, like rustling leaves in forest night, beside the falls of Nimrodel, by waters clear and musical. Her voice rang silver as it fell across the shining lake's soft swell.
None could tell where she would stray, in sunlit morn or starlit grey, in ancient days by Nimrodel.
And in the mountains shadowed high, upon an elven ship near western sky, beneath the sheltering mountain steep,
long did they wait with hearts that weep, beside the sea that ever roared,
while northern winds unceasing soared. The wind arose and fiercely cried, it drove the ship from elven tide, beyond the swell, the foam, the spray, till dawn grew dim and land slipped away. The mountains sank, no sound was heard, beneath the waves that thundered stirred, and shattered trees on mountain crown.
Amroth beheld the shore go down, beneath the tide's relentless sweep.
In madness wild he cursed the deep, the ship that bore him far from Dell, from Nimrodel he loved so well. In days of old he was a king, of elven glades and blossoming spring, where leaves turned gold when springtime came, in shining Lothlorien's fair name. Then helm he cast, and leapt below, as arrow flies from tautened bow. He sank beneath the faithful sea, like seabird white in flight set free. The wind flew wild through his golden hair, the sea about him shimmered fair. From far away he shone so bright, like swan that cleaves the moonlit night. But westward came no tidings more, and on this mortal eastern shore the elves have never since been told of Amroth's fate in legends old. Legolas's voice faded, and the song came to an end.
I cannot sing any more, he said.
But that is only part of it, and I have forgotten much. It is long and sorrowful, for it tells how grief first fell upon Lothlorien.
Lorien of hope, when the dwarves awakened evil in the mountains. But the dwarves did not make the evil, said Gimli. I did not say so, replied Legolas sadly. Yet the evil came.
Many of the elves of Nimrodel then fled their dwellings, and she wandered far into the south, along the paths of the White Mountains. And she returned not to the ship where Amroth, her beloved, waited. But in springtime her voice is said still to echo in the rustling leaves of her tower's boughs, and when the southern wind blows, the cry of Amroth is heard upon the sea, from Nimrodel down to the Silverlode, that the elves call Celebrant, and from Celebrant to the great river Anduin, and thence into the bay of Belfalas, where the elves of Lorien once set sail. Yet neither Nimrodel nor Amroth ever returned. They say she had a dwelling built upon the branches near the falls, for such was the custom of the elves of Lorien who lived among the trees. Perhaps it still stands. For this reason they are called the Galadrim, the tree people. Deep in their woods the trees grow vast and tall. The forest folk dwell not upon the ground like dwarves, nor do they make their homes in stone, at least not before the shadow came, even to this day.
Living in trees seems safer than sitting upon the ground, said Gimli. He looked across the stream flowing toward the path that led back into Dimrill Dale,
And then upward to the dark canopy of branches above. Your words are wise, Gimli, said Aragorn. We cannot build a house, but tonight we shall do as the Galadrim do, and seek shelter high in the trees, if we are able. We will rest there beside the long and lonely road that none now know well. The fellowship now turned aside from the path and went deep into the shadowed woods, westward along the mountain streams flowing from the Silverlode. Not far from the falls of Nimrodel, they found a grove of trees where the stream ran out from among them. The great grey trunks were enormous, their height unguessable. I will climb up, said Legolas. Among these trees I feel at home, whether under root or upon branch, though these are strange to me, save that their name is in the song. They are called melon, and they bear golden blossoms. Yet I have never climbed one before. Now I shall see what form they take and how they grow. Whatever they are, said Pippin, they must be truly marvellous trees if they can offer a place to rest for the night, unless it's only meant for birds.
I could never sleep up high.
And dig yourself a hole in the ground, said Legolas. That would suit your people's custom well enough. But you'll have to dig fast and deep if you wish to hide from the orcs. With that, he sprang lightly from the ground and caught a branch that grew from a tall tree above his head. Yet even as he hung there, a voice suddenly rang out from the darkness above, sharp and commanding, "Darrow!" Legolas dropped back to the ground in surprise and alarm, drawing close to the tree. "Stay still," he whispered to the others. "Do not move or speak." A soft laugh drifted down from the leaves above, followed by another voice speaking in the elven tongue. Frodo could understand little of what was said, for the speech of the elves east of the mountains differed much from that of the west. Legolas looked up and answered in the same tongue. "Who are they, and what are they saying?" Merry asked. "They are elves," said Sam. "Don't you hear the sound of their voices?" "Yes, they are elves," said Legolas, "and they say you breathe so loudly they could shoot you in the dark." Sam clapped a hand over his mouth. "But they also say you need not be afraid. They have known of us for some time. They heard my voice along Nimrodel and knew that I was one of their northern kindred, and so they did not hinder our way. They also heard my song. Now they bid me climb up with Frodo, for it seems they have some knowledge of him and of our errand. The others must wait below and remain under watch until they decide what shall be done." A ladder was lowered out of the darkness. It was made of grey rope that gleamed silver in the moonlight, and though it looked slender, it was strong enough to bear many at once. Legolas climbed swiftly, and Frodo followed more slowly. Sam came after, trying hard not to breathe too loudly. The branches of a great tree stood out almost straight from the trunk, then turned upward, forming near the top a crown of many boughs, and amid them they found a wooden platform, a flet, as such things were then called. The elves named it a talon. To reach it, one had to pass through a round opening in the centre from which the ladder hung. When at last Frodo came up onto the flet, he found Legolas seated with 3 elves. They wore dark grey clothing,
unseen among the tree shadows, save when they moved.
They rose, and one of them uncovered a small lamp that gave a faint silver light. He stood gazing at Frodo and Sam, then shaded the light again and spoke words of greeting in Elvish. Frodo stammered in reply. "Welcome," said the elf again, now in the common speech, slowly and clearly. "We seldom use any tongue but our own, and we dwell now in the heart of the wood, and are unwilling to speak with any strangers. Even our northern kin seldom meet with us. But some among us go abroad gathering tidings and watching our enemies. They know the tongues of other lands."
"I am one of those. Haldir is my name."
"These are my brothers, Rumil and Orifin. They can speak a little of your tongue." but we have heard rumors of your journey, for the messengers of Elrond passed through Lorien on their way home by the Dimrill Stair. We have heard no news of hobbits, of halflings, for many long years.
And we know little of the folk of the Shire. You seem kindly enough.
And since you come with one of our own kin, we are willing to be your friends, as Elrond has said, though it is not our custom to lead strangers through our land.
Yet you must stay here tonight. How many are you?
8, said Legolas. Myself, 4 hobbits, 2 men, one of them Aragorn, a friend of the elves of the west. In Lorien, the name of Aragorn, son of Arathorn, is known, said Haldir. And he has the favour of a lady. So far, all is well.
But you have named only 7. The 8th is a dwarf, said Legolas. A dwarf,
said Haldir. That is ill news. We have had no dealings with dwarves since the dark days. They are not permitted in our land.
I cannot allow him to pass. But he comes from the Lonely Mountain, said Frodo, one of the trusty dwarves of Durin's folk, and a friend of Elrond himself.
Elrond chose him to be one of our company, and he is brave and true. The elves spoke softly among themselves, and questioned Legolas in their own tongue. Very well, said Haldir at last. We will do this, though it is against our wish. If Aragorn and Legolas answer for him and keep watch upon him, he may pass, but he must go blindfold through Lothlorien. But now we can speak no more of this. Your people must stay below. We have kept watch on the river bank, for we saw a great company of orcs moving northward toward Moria, along the mountainside many days ago. Wolves are howling on the borders of the wood. If indeed you come out of Moria, danger cannot be far behind you. You must go on early in the morning. All 4 hobbits may come up here and rest with us. We are not afraid of them. There is another talon in the next tree. The others must remain hidden there. You, Legolas, shall answer for them. Call to us if anything goes amiss, and keep an eye on the dwarf. Legolas went down at once to deliver Haldir's message, and soon after Merry and Pippin climbed breathlessly up the high flet, pale and shaken. Here we are,
panted Merry. We've brought your blankets as well as our own.
Strider has hidden the rest of the baggage under a heap of leaves. You will not need your baggage, said Haldir. In winter the treetops are cold, though tonight the wind comes from the south. But we have food and drink to chase away the chill and spare cloaks besides. The hobbits gratefully, and more than gratefully, accepted the cloaks. Then they wrapped themselves warmly, not only in the elven fur-lined cloaks, but also in their own blankets, and tried to sleep. Yet, weary as they were, only Sam succeeded easily. Hobbits were not fond of heights and never slept up in trees, even in houses with stairs. The flet pleased them little as a bedchamber. It had no walls, not even a rail, only on one side a light screen that could be moved and set according to the wind. Pippin talked for a while.
I hope that sleeping in this loft and this attic in the sky I won't roll off, he said.
When I'm asleep, muttered Sam, I go on sleeping whether I roll or not. And the more you talk, the sooner you'll roll off, if you take my meaning. Frodo lay awake for a while, looking up at the stars glimmering through the faint roof of gently stirring leaves. Sam was snoring beside him long before he could close his eyes. He could just make out the shadowy shapes of 2 elves sitting still with arms about their knees, murmuring softly together. The third had gone down to keep watch below. At last, lulled by the whisper of wind in the branches above and the gentle murmur of Nimrodel below, Frodo fell asleep with Legolas's song still echoing in his mind. Late in the night, he woke. The other hobbits slept. The elves were gone. A pale crescent moon shone faintly through the leaves. The wind had died. Then he heard a harsh laugh and many footfalls moving on the ground below. There came a clink of metal. The sounds faded slowly southward into the forest. Suddenly a head appeared through the hole in the flet. Frodo started up. A grey hood of an elf gleamed in the dim light. He looked at the hobbits. What is it?
Frodo whispered. "Yeah,"
hissed the elf, and drew the rope ladder up onto the flet.
"Orcs," said Frodo. "What are they doing?"
But the elf was gone. Then there was no sound at all. Even the leaves were silent, and even the noise of the waterfall seemed to have ceased. Frodo sat down and shivered in his cloak. He was deeply thankful that they had not been caught on the ground, yet he felt that the trees gave little protection beyond concealment. Orcs were said to have a sense of smell like hunting dogs, and they could also climb. He drew out Sting. It gleamed and flickered like a blue flame, and then slowly faded and grew dull again. Though the blade had dimmed, the feeling of immediate danger did not leave Frodo. Rather, it grew stronger. He rose and crawled out to a space where he could look down. He was almost certain he could hear stealthy movements far below among the trunks. They were not elves, for the folk of this wood made little or no sound as they moved. Then he heard faintly what sounded like a sniff, and something seemed to be groping along the bark of the tree. He peered down into the darkness, holding his breath. Something was climbing slowly, and its breath came as a soft hiss between clenched teeth. Then Frodo saw two pale, gleaming eyes rise up near the trunk. They halted and stared upward, unblinking. Suddenly they turned aside, and a dark shape slipped round the tree and vanished. Immediately after, Haldir came swiftly climbing up among the branches. "There is something in this tree that I have never seen before," he said. "It was no orc. It vanished quickly when I touched the trunk. It seemed wary, and it climbs very well. And I think it might be one of your own folk, one of the hobbits. I did not shoot, for I dared not make any cry. We cannot risk a skirmish."
A strong company of orcs has just passed by.
They crossed the Nimrodel, they fouled her clean waters with their filthy feet, and went down along the old road beside the river. It seems they had caught some scent, and were searching the ground for a while near where you halted. The three of us could not stand against 100, so we went ahead and raised our voices as if in talk to draw them deeper into the woods. Orifin has gone back in haste to our dwelling to warn our people.
No orc will ever leave Lorien alive.
There will be many elves hidden along the northern borders in the nights to come, but you must go southward as soon as daylight returns. Day was slowly dawning in the east. As the light grew stronger, it filtered through the golden malon leaves, and the hobbits felt as though the early sun of a cool summer morning was shining on them. The pale blue sky appeared through the whispering boughs. Frodo looked down southward from the flet and saw the valley of the Silverlode lying like a golden sea, softly rippling in the breeze. Morning was still early and chill when the company set out again, now led by Haldir and his brother Rúmil. "Farewell, sweet Nimrodel," cried Legolas. Frodo looked back and glimpsed a glimmer of white mist among the grey tree stems. "Farewell," he said. He felt as if he would never again hear the sound of rippling water blending its countless notes into endless music. They turned back to the path running west of the Silverlode and followed a trail leading southward. Orc prints were thick upon the ground, but Haldir soon turned aside into the woods and halted in their shadow by the river bank. "One of our folk is across the stream," he said, "though you may not see him." He gave a call, like the chirping of a small bird, and an elf stepped out of a young thicket. He was clad in grey, but his hood was thrown back, and his hair glinted like gold in the morning sun. Haldir skillfully threw a grey rope across the river. The elf caught it and fastened it to a tree on the far side. "Here the Celebrant is indeed a strong stream, as you see," said Haldir. "It flows both swiftly and deep, and is very cold. We do not set foot in it far north of here unless we must. But in these days of watchfulness we make no bridges."
"This is how we cross. Follow me."
He ran lightly along the rope, crossed the river, and came back again as if walking on firm ground. "I can go that way," said Legolas, "but the others cannot." "Must they swim?" No, said Haldir. We have 2 more ropes. We shall fasten them above, one at shoulder height, one at waist height, and hold them tight for all to grip as they cross. When the slender bridge was ready, the company crossed, some carefully and slowly, others more easily. Pippin was best among the hobbits, sure-footed and quick, using only one hand to steady himself. But he kept his eyes fixed ahead and never looked down. Sam crept along, clutching tight, and looked down into the swirling water, as if into a chasm. He sighed with relief when he reached the far bank. "Live and learn, as my old gaffer used to say," he said, though he meant nothing about walking on ropes or nesting like birds.
Even my cousin Andy never tried a trick like that.
When all had crossed safely, the elves unfastened the ropes and coiled them up. Rumil, who remained on the far side, gathered the last rope, slung it over his shoulder,
Waved and vanished again, returning to Nimrodel to keep watch. Now,
"My friends," said Haldir, "you have come to the Naith of Lorien, or the Gore as you call it, for it lies like a spearhead between the arms of the Silverlode and the great river Anduin. We do not allow strangers to spy out our secrets here in the Naith. Indeed, few are ever permitted even to set foot upon it, but, according to our agreement, here I must blindfold the dwarf Gimli. The others may walk freely until we approach our dwelling near the eaves of Egladil, in the angle between the waters." This displeased Gimli greatly. "This agreement was never made with my consent," he said. "I will not go blindfold like a beggar or prisoner."
I am no spy. My folk have never dealt treacherously with any servants of the enemy, nor have we done harm to the elves. I will betray you no more than Legolas or any of my companions." "I do not doubt you," said Haldir.
"But these are our laws."
"I am not their maker, and may not set them aside."
"I have already done much in allowing you to set foot upon the celebrant." Gimli stood firm, his legs planted wide, and his hand upon his axe. "I will go free," he said, "or I will return and seek my own land, where I know the meaning of my words, though I face the wild alone." "You cannot go back," said Haldir. "Now that you have come so far, you must be brought before the Lord and Lady. They shall judge whether to keep you or to send you away. You cannot recross the river, and behind you lie secret posts that you cannot pass. You would be slain before you saw them." Gimli drew his axe. Haldir and his companions bent their bows. "Curse the stiff necks of dwarves," said Legolas. "Come," said Aragorn. "If I am still the leader of the company, you will follow my command. To leave the dwarf thus is not wise. We will all be blindfolded, even Legolas. That is best, though it will make our journey slower and more weary." Gimli laughed suddenly. "A merry troop we shall be. Will Haldir lead us to a stream, all of us blind beggars with a dog to guide us? But I am content, if only Legolas shares my blindness." "I am an elf and a kinsman here," said Legolas, his anger rising. "And now it is our turn to say, 'Curse the stiff necks of elves,'" said Aragorn. "But the fellowship shall share one fate. Blindfold us all, Haldir. I shall demand compensation for every bruise and stubbed toe if you do not lead us well," said Gimli, as they tied the cloths over his eyes. "You shall demand nothing," said Haldir. "I will lead you well, and the path will be straight and easy." "These are strange days," said Legolas. "Here are all enemies of one enemy, yet I must go blindfold under a merry sun in a wood of golden leaves." "It seems indeed strange," said Haldir. "Truly there is no clearer proof of the power of the Dark Lord than the estrangement that divides all who still oppose him. But now trust and understanding have grown thin in the world beyond Lothlorien, save perhaps in Rivendell. We dare not endanger our land by too much trust. We live now upon an island fenced by peril, and our hands are more often on the bowstring than on the harp. The rivers have long guarded us, but they will not be our faithful watchmen forever. for the shadow is creeping down from the north. Some have spoken of departing, yet it seems too late. The mountains in the west are infested with evil. The lands to the east are desolate and crawling with creatures of Sauron. And there are rumors that we cannot safely go southward through Rohan, for the mouths of the great river are watched by the enemy. Even if we could reach the sea, we would not find shelter there. It is said that there are still havens of the high elves, but they lie far away to the north and west, beyond the land of the halflings. Yet where they are, even if the lord and lady know, I do not. At least you might guess, since you have seen us, said Merry. There is a haven of elves to the west of my country, the shire where the hobbits dwell. Happy folk who live near the sea, said Haldir. It is long since my people watched there, yet we still remember it in our songs. Tell us of those havens as we walk. I cannot, said Merry. I have never seen them. I had never left my own land before now. And if I had known what the world outside was like, I don't think I would have had the courage to leave it. Not even to see Lothlorien, said Haldir. The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places. But still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it still grows, perhaps, the greater. In some places we still sing that shadow will fade and peace shall come again. Yet I do not believe that our world will ever again be as it was, or that the light of the sun will return in its former splendor. For the elves, I fear, the best hope is for a time of peace to cross the sea unhindered and leave Middle-earth forever. Bless Lothlorien that I have loved. Life would be a dull affair in a land without Malorn trees. But if there are Malans beyond the great sea, no one has ever heard of them. As they spoke, the fellowship trod slowly along forest paths, led by Haldir, while the other elf followed at the rear. The earth beneath their feet was soft and easy, and after a while they moved more comfortably, without fear of stumbles or pain. Deprived of sight, Frodo found his hearing and other senses sharpened. He could smell the trees and bent grasses. He could hear many distinct tones in the rustling leaves overhead, the distant murmur of the river to his right, and a clear bird-song drifting above. He felt the sun upon his face and hands as they crossed a meadow. Just as he stepped onto the far bank of the Silverlode, a strange sensation overtook him. Growing stronger as he entered the Nath, it was as though he walked on a bridge of time into an angle of the ancient days, now treading a world that no longer existed. At Rivendell, memories of the old world endure. In Lorien, the ancient realm still lives in the living world. There one can still glimpse and hear evil, still know sorrow. Elves fear and distrust the outside world.
Wolves howl on the forest borders.
Yet, upon Lorien, no darkness reigns. The fellowship continued walking all through the day, until they felt the chill of late afternoon, and heard the early winds of night whispering among the leaves. Then they rested and slept without fear on the forest floor, for their guides would not allow them to remove their blindfolds, and they could not climb. The next morning they resumed their journey, stepping evenly and unhurriedly. By midday they halted, and Frodo realized they had walked beyond the sunlight. Suddenly he heard many sounds stirring around him. A company of elves was advancing quietly. They hastened north to guard against any assault from Moria. They bore news, the things Haldir had reported. The raiding orcs had been ambushed and nearly destroyed. The survivors fled west across the mountains, pursued. At the same time, they saw a strange creature, creeping stooped, hand near the ground, looking like a beast, yet not of beast form. It avoided capture, and they did not shoot it, uncertain whether it was friend or foe, and it disappeared southward beyond the Silverlode. Moreover, said Haldir, they bring me a message from the Lord and Lady of the Galadrim. You are free to travel, even the dwarf Gimli. It seems the lady knows each of your fellowship by name and nature. Perhaps further tidings will come from Rivendell. He drew the blindfold from Gimli's eyes.
Forgive me,
He said, bowing low.
see us now with friendly eyes.
Behold and rejoice, for you are the first dwarf to gaze on the Mallen woods of the Nath of Lorien since the days of Durin. When his eyes were no longer veiled, Frodo looked up and drew a breath. They stood in a broad clearing. To their left was a grassy rise, green as though spring everlasting reigned. Above it, like a double crown, were 2 rings of trees. Outer, still white-frosted, bare but majestic. Inner tall malins crowned in golden leaf. In their midst, upon branches of a central tree, shone a white flet, luminous. At the tree bases and on the hillsides the turf was stitched with golden star-shaped flowers. Amid them, on slender stems, gleamed pale blossoms of white and faint blue, winking like a veil between coloured grasses. Over all, a deep blue sky. Afternoon sun lit the hilltop and cast long green shadows beneath the woods. "Look you have come to Carin Amroth," said Haldir. "For this is the heart of that ancient realm, as it has always been. This mound is Amroth's hill, where his high house once stood in happier days. The winter blooms still flower on the fields that never fail, golden Eleanor and pale Nifredil. We shall rest here a while, then enter the city of the Galadrim at twilight." The others lay down upon the fragrant meadows below, but Frodo remained still, steeped in wonder. He felt as though passing through a high window into a vanished world. His tongue could not name the light shining upon it. All that he saw was fair beyond words, yet the shapes seemed to appear instantly, as though formed and drawn before his newly freed eyes, ancient as though they had always existed. He could not see colours, but he knew them, gold, white, blue and green, vivid and deep, as though he beheld them for the first time and gave them new, wondrous names. Here in winter there was no frost, in summer or spring no sorrow. No blemish, disease or deformity marred one living thing. In Lorien's land there was no stain. He turned and saw Sam beside him, gazing about in astonishment, rubbing his eyes as though unsure he was awake. "This is sunlight and day so bright," he murmured.
I always thought elves were creatures of moon and star. Yet here there is more elf in this land than any tale I ever heard. I feel as though I live inside a song, if you know what I mean. Haldir looked at them and seemed truly to wish to understand their thoughts as well as their words.
He smiled. "You are feeling the power of the Lady of the Galadrim," he said. "Would you be pleased to climb with me to Carin Amroth?" They followed as he stepped lightly up grassy slopes. Though breathing hard, and though leaves and blossoms trembled at the same breeze brushing their faces, Frodo felt as though he trod in a land eternal, unconsumed, unchanged, never fading or forgotten. When returned to the outer world, Frodo would feel like a wanderer from the Shire, stepping upon these flowers once more, between Eleanor and Nifredil in fair Lorien. They entered the circle of white trees. As they did, a southern wind swept across Carin Amroth and stirred the branches. Frodo stood still, hearing from afar the beat of sea waves upon distant shores and the calls of seabirds whose kin now risked extinction in the world. Haldir climbed high to the flet. As Frodo prepared to follow, he laid a hand on the trunk beside the ladder. Never before had he felt such a sudden, clear awakening of texture and life in the bark. He felt joy within the wood, the emotion of the living tree, not as a woodsman or craftsman, but the tree's own exhilaration. When he finally stepped onto that high platform, Haldir took his hand and turned him southward. "First look this way," he said. Frodo looked and saw, at a distance, a hill of towering trees, or a city of green towers, he could not tell which. Beyond it, power and light seemed to hold sway over all wavering lands. He felt he would fly like a bird to rest there. Then he looked east and saw all Lorien's lands descending toward the Anduin. The great river glimmered far away. He raised his eyes across the river, and all the colors faded, and he returned to the world he had known. The land beyond that river lay flat and empty and vague until it rose again in distant hills, dark and somber. The sun over Lorien no longer had power to light those distant shadows. "The southern fortress of Mirkwood lies there," said Haldir. "It is a shell birthed from the dark firs of the forest, where the trees press close, their branches decaying and gnarled. Upon a rocky height within it stands Dol Guldur, once hid by the enemy long ago. We fear it now lies abandoned, yet filled sevenfold with power again. A black swarm hovers over it of late. From this high vantage one may see two towers confronting each other. They seem always locked in opposition, yet though light has claimed the heart of darkness, its secret is not laid bare."
Not yet. He turned and nimbly descended, and they followed. At the foot of the slope, Frodo saw Aragorn, still standing silent as a tree, holding a small golden Eleanor in his hand, a gleam in his eyes.
He seemed wrapped in gentle memories. As Frodo looked, he knew Aragorn beheld things he alone had seen before. The harsh years had left Aragorn's face. He looked like a youthful lord in white raiment. He spoke in Elvish to someone unseen. "Arwen Vanimelda Namaria," he said, then exhaled deeply. Snapping out of memory, he looked at Frodo and smiled. "This is the heart of the elven realm in the world," he said, "and my heart will dwell here forever, unless I find a light beyond dark paths which we must yet tread, you and I. Walk with me." And with that, he grasped Frodo's hand, leaving Cerin Amroth behind, never to return to it as a living man again.